Hello, Elisa, and happy Tuesday. Ready for your joke? Joke of the day. What do you get when you cross a fishing lure with a gym sock? You get a hook, line, and stinker. Yes. Okay. So anyway, for today, we'll kind of continue the civil rights movement up through basically 1965, right up to the Black Power movement when that becomes popular, right? So hopefully you're very familiar with the Black Power movement since you have that paper, which is due on Monday. Okay, so there's the reminder for that. So for today, starting with 1963, Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, which for homework tonight, you get to watch, and then you're going to create some kind of artistic response to it. So it's about a 17-minute speech. It's on YouTube. I hit the link for you. So as you listen to this, it's filled with imagery in terms of the language that he uses. So there's tons of different images that you get. So I'm asking you to create a visual on that. So you could pick a phrase, you can do the whole, the whole thing, however you want to look at it, and then you're going to create a visual that kind of encapsulates your impressions or what you're left with as a result of that speech. You can just do it. You can draw pictures. You can do it with words. You can, if you want to do it digitally, you can do it digitally. Though there might be something kind of like fun and therapeutic to actually, getting out the pencils and the crayons and doing some drawing. And then take a picture of it and or scan it or attach it, upload it somehow, and that is your homework for tonight. In addition, we also talk a little bit about voting rights. And so you'll see there's some other short little videos for you, as well as some video with some notes. I also included the Louisiana literacy test, and that's something maybe you can like do at home with your folks. That was a test that Blacks had to take to show that they were literate. And so once they could prove they were literate, they could then register to vote. The test is designed for people to fail. So that might be something, for you guys to do with your families tonight and, see and get frustrated in trying to do it. And that's the point, right? I think you can actually Google and find the answers if you just Google Louisiana literacy test and find them if you need them that way. But it might be fun to kind of work through it for a while. So anyway, so I hope all is well. Hope everything's going great. Stay safe, stay smart, and see you guys later. Miss you. Bye. Today we will continue on talking about the civil rights movement, primarily focusing on 1963 and 1964. So in 1963, we have Martin Luther King's famous March on Washington, which culminates in his I Have a Dream speech, which is your homework tonight. To look at that speech, to listen to that speech, and then respond. So this is considered by many one of the highlights of the entire movement. Anywhere between 250,000 to 500,000 people, white, black, gathering in Washington, D.C., with Martin Luther King giving his famous speech on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. Unfortunately, though, it is not received very well throughout the country, and there is kind of instant retaliation to these things. You have the death of Medgar Evers, who was a civil rights activist in Mississippi. As a result of that, you have John F. Kennedy then coming on national television and urging civil rights legislation. With John F. Kennedy then urging for civil rights legislation, you have a hideous bombing at the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham. This is the same church that was the kind of the headquarters for the Children's Crusade, right? So the movie you watched the other day in class. And the story here, you have 3 girls who are killed when members of the KKK place a bomb outside a basement window. And it happens, and the timing is just perfect for this, right? That it is, they have religious school in the morning, classes are held in the basement. Then there's a little bit of a break in which everyone goes upstairs for church. These 3 girls stayed behind, went to the bathroom. In the bathroom, they were getting themselves ready for church, doing their hair, makeup. That's when the bomb went off, and that's when they were killed. And again, here are some images of that. And kind of as par for the course for a lot of this racial violence through the South, the FBI investigates, but they need the assistance of local law enforcement, and local law enforcement is not in inclined to pursue this. Um, it'll take Oprah Winfrey decades later on her show to kind of get people to actually face justice for this, in which she does an entire episode of her television show on this. And a woman basically calls into the FBI and says, I think my grandfather might have had something to do with it. And so a granddaughter turns in her own grandfather decades later to finally get some kind of justice for this crime. Struggle that's kind of going on concurrently is a push for voting rights, which we kind of talked a little bit about with the Freedom Riders. Um, there had been uh, each state had a series of laws that basically their purpose was voter suppression. You have states with large African American populations that are ineligible to vote. You have a state like Mississippi, in which more than half the people living in the state of Mississippi are African American, but only 3% of registered voters in Mississippi are actually, are black. So this is a problem. So this is how you have white segregationists holding on to power. So the civil rights movement kind of takes it upon themselves to get rid of these laws. And these states created these really horrible tests um, that when I'll include an example for you on the classwork that you can just kind of look at and see and try to figure out. The tests are designed for you to fail. There's no way to pass them. They give you such a short amount of time to complete these tests, and they're arbitrary. Some questions have multiple answers. And again, all this was designed to prevent blacks from voting. And the laws were also worded in a sense that they had grandfather clauses, meaning that if your grandfather was eligible to vote, you didn't have to take this test. So, of course, you go 2 generations back for African Americans in 1965, 2 generations back, and they're slaves, and they're not eligible to vote. So you have movements around the country um, pushing for voting rights. And what you have is an event called Bloody Sunday, which happens in Selma. It is a march from Selma to Montgomery, Montgomery being the capital of Alabama, pushing for voting rights. And as these civil rights advocates are marching across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, they are met with police violence, which is captured by television cameras and it is played on the local news everywhere. And I've included a video for you to kind of watch that. It's kind of movements like this that have great influence in the civil rights kind of movement. Um, Also, kind of backing up a little bit, um, kind of with those two concurrent things of civil rights legislation dealing with segregation laws, and then voting rights. You did have President Kennedy beginning to push for civil rights. President Kennedy in 1963, in the summer of 1963, actually goes on television and asks for civil rights legislation. That November of 1963, he is shot and killed while visiting Dallas, Texas, bringing Lyndon Baines Johnson, or LBJ, into the White House. LBJ is a Southerner. He's from Texas. He is in favor of civil rights. Lyndon Johnson believes, as a Southerner, that the only way for the South to ever progress is to get on board with civil rights. He believes, and history proves him correct, that once the South kind of fully integrates, then the South can modernize, then the South can industrialize, and then the South can actually become its own economic engine. And history has proven that true if you look at like today's society. So Lyndon Johnson very quickly in 1964, using the death of John F. Kennedy as kind of a catalyst, passes the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which makes segregation illegal in all public places. He then follows that up with the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which makes it illegal to discriminate in terms of voting practices, voter registration, voter suppression, and those types of things. Two landmark pieces of civil rights legislation. Again, this should be the high point of the civil rights movement, but again, you're going to have pushback from this. And pushback's going to come in two different kind of ways, and as it's met with violence, you're going to see that that American blacks are kind of tired of constantly being beat up upon, and we can talk about that during our next class.